Here are today's news. In a statement earlier today, African Union said it has launched peace talks between the government of Tigray and the government of Ethiopia in South Africa. South Africa, on its part, said it was honored to hold the peace talk that many hope would bring an end to the ongoing brutal conflict in Ethiopia. Abel Sagab reports.
African Union Chairperson Musa Faki Mohammed issued a statement on Tuesday to announce the start of the much-anticipated peace talks between the government of Tigray and the government of Ethiopia in South Africa. The Republic of South Africa expresses its honor to host the peace talk, saying that such talks are in line with its foreign policy objectives of creating a secure and conflict-free Africa. The spokesperson for South African President Vincent Magwenya said the African Union-led talks that started earlier today are expected to continue until Sunday.
South Africa is hosting peace talks to end the conflict in the Tigray region. And in this regard, President Ramaphosa is honored that the government of the Republic of South Africa has been requested to host the African Union-led peace talks between the government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia and Tigray. The peace talks, which have been convened to find a peaceful and sustainable solution to the devastating conflict in the Tigray region, started today, the 25th of October, and will end on the 30th of October. As a country committed to the African Union's objectives of silencing the guns, South Africa is ready to serve as a host and provide assistance to the peace talks. President Ramaphosa readily agreed when he received the African Union's request for South Africa to host the peace talks. Such talks are in line with South Africa's foreign policy objectives of a secure and conflict-free continent.
The spokesperson also stated that South Africa hopes that the peace talk will result in an end to the deathless conflict that has devastated the lives of millions.
South Africa wishes the facilitation team well and hopes the talks will proceed constructively and result in a successful outcome that leads to lasting peace for all the people of our dear sister country, Ethiopia.
Many hope the peace talk will lead to an end of the 2 years conflict that has killed hundreds of thousands of people, displaced millions, and distressed many more. The government of Tigray has explained that it expects the peace talks to bring cessation of hostilities, unfettered humanitarian access, and the withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Ethiopia.
President of the government of Tigray, Debretsion ገብረሚካኤል, said new rounds of atrocities are underway in areas that have fallen under the occupation of Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Briefing the media on Monday, the president said that Tigrayan forces were capable of defending their people should the peace talks fail to stop the genocide against the people of Tigray. Again, Abel Sagab reports.
In his briefing on Monday, the president of Tigray, Debretsion ገብረሚካኤል, said both Eritrean and Ethiopian forces carry on their invasion while his government remains on its demand to solve the conflict in a peaceful manner.
Besides the siege and blockade, the disease and starvation as well as bombing, the joint forces are conducting a massive invasion on the people of Tigray, orchestrating all their potentials. They invade us, rejecting our call to resolve the conflict peacefully. The purpose of the invasion is neither to rule Tigray nor to enforce law and order. It is to annihilate the people of Tigray. It is to achieve their genocidal campaign.
The president stated that horrific atrocities, including mass detention and extrajudicial killings, are taking place in the areas Eritrean and Ethiopian forces have conquered.
In the area the joint forces have occupied, starting from northwestern Tigray, not to mention the obvious ongoing atrocities in western Tigray, and in other areas including central Tigray, they are committing horrific atrocities. That was the purpose of their invasion, and they are implementing it. They are killing children and the elderly. They have killed a nursing mother whose baby is 2 years old. They are cold-hearted and barbaric. The youths are being detained wherever they are found. They are also being killed.
Confirming the arrival of his delegates in South Africa on Monday, President Debretsion noted that his government always has a firm stance on the need to resolve the conflict peacefully.
We are forced into war. We have asked for the resolution of every conflict through peaceful and discussion, and for political differences to be solved through election. We have pleaded for the right of the people to decide with their own votes. Even now, while we are invaded, we have sent our delegates to South Africa for a peace talk. For peace, we are always ready. We have shown our commitment for peace to everyone.
Representative of the government of Tigray in Europe, Dr. Aklilu Haile Michael, said his government expects an immediate cessation of hostilities, withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigrayan territories, and unfettered humanitarian access into the region from the peace talks taking place in South Africa. Avel Zgabo has more on this.
In his brief stay with France 24 on Monday, representative of the government of Tigray in Europe, Dr. Aklilu Haile Michael said the government of Tigray expects the peace talks in South Africa to result in conditional and immediate cessation of hostilities that would bring an end to the ongoing bloodbath in Tigray.
We expect results in 4 areas. The first is unconditional and immediate cessation of hostilities. Actually, I have been saying this in a statement that we issued on September 11. Secondly, the recent resumption of the fighting has resulted in a new wave of internally displaced people. Around 1 million additional people have been displaced because of the fighting. So we expect there will be unfettered humanitarian access to people who live in areas controlled by the allied forces as well as by the Ethiopian government, by the Tigray government. Thirdly, atrocities are taking place inside cities and other areas that are controlled by the allied forces. So we would like international human rights institutions as well as international media to come in and observe those atrocities. And fourthly, the cessation of hostilities cannot work if Eritrea does not withdraw. You can't have an effective cessation of hostilities implemented without a third party that is already actively participating in the conflict being drawn out of the conflict itself. So we expect Eritrea will withdraw if the cessation of hostility is signed.
Dr. Aklilu, former State Minister for Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said the joint Eritrean and Ethiopian forces are committing unspeakable atrocities, including the detention of thousands of youngsters in the areas they have recently captured.
There is a complete media blackout in the region, but people who managed to escape areas that are controlled by the allied forces are telling us that the Eritrean and the Ethiopian forces are rounding up hundreds, if not thousands, of young people and then putting them in concentration camps. And they want to continue the kind of atrocities we saw 2 years ago in the first round of fighting.
Asked about doubts on sustainability of cessation of hostilities in light of earlier experience on humanitarian truce, Dr. Aklilu said the government of Tigray believes that military solution is not a solution to the conflict and will commit itself to the cessation of hostilities.
I can only express the commitment from our side. We have been very consistent since the first round of cessation of hostilities. We have been issuing statements that we are looking for immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities. But the other side may think that there may be a military solution to the conflict, which is not true. Their advances and control of some cities in Tigray might make them feel that there is a military solution to the conflict. That won't happen at all. Even if they control all the cities in Tigray, it doesn't mean the conflict has ended. The struggle for survival of the people of Tigray will continue in one way or the other.
On Monday's briefing, President Debretsion Michael has confirmed the safe arrival of his delegates in South Africa.
U.S. senators urged for cessation of hostilities in Ethiopia ahead of peace talks in South Africa. In a letter sent to the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, the senators welcomed the Ethiopian government's decision to participate in peace talks in South Africa. The senators, Jim Rist, Jeff Merkley, Bob Menendez, and 6 others urged an immediate cessation of hostilities, including the withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigray and allow unfettered humanitarian access to the people in need. The letter said nearly 2.5 million civilians have been displaced and approximately 500,000 killed in Tigray as a result of the war. The senators added the collapse of the 5-month-long humanitarian truce halted necessary aid from entering the region, which left 5.2 million people in a dire situation. The senators finally stated their hopes for the AU-led negotiations to be a signal for an end to the conflict and pave the way for accountability to the human rights abuses. In a statement on Monday, spokesperson to the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, said the crisis in Tigray is one of the worst in the world. The spokesperson commended the South African government and other mediators for their effort in bringing both sides to the table and discuss on peaceful resolution to the ongoing conflict so that unfettered humanitarian access is ensured and further human rights abuses are prevented. Sarun Tsagay.
On a briefing on Monday, Karine Jean-Pierre, press secretary to the White House, said that the African Union-led peace talks between the Ethiopian government and the government of Tigray have begun in South Africa. On the statement, the United States commended the South African government and other mediators for their efforts in bringing both sides to the table and discuss on peaceful resolution to the ongoing conflict. The press secretary also noted that the United States has been intensely involved in supporting the launch of the peace talk and said that the special envoy for the Horn of Africa, Ambassador Mike Hammer, is participating as well.
Today in South Africa, African Union-led talks kicked off to address the conflict in northern Ethiopia. We commend South Africa for hosting the talks and stand ready to support African Union High Representative Obasanjo and AU panel members, former South African Deputy Labuguka and former Kenyan President Kenyatta, in facilitating an agreement. As President Biden told the UN General Assembly last month, a peace process is needed to end the fighting in Ethiopia and restore security for all its people. The United States has been intensely involved diplomatically in supporting the launch of this mediation effort. Our special envoy for the Horn of Africa, Ambassador Mike Hammer, has been in the region the past several weeks and will be participating as well.
The press secretary stressed that there is no military solution to the conflict and called on both parties to engage seriously on the AU-led peace talks to achieve an immediate cessation of hostilities, unfettered delivery of humanitarian access, prevention of further human rights abuses, and Eritrea's withdrawal from Tigray.
No military solution to this conflict. We call on the government of Ethiopia and the Tigrayan authorities to engage seriously in the AU-led talks to achieve an immediate cessation of hostilities, unhindered delivery of humanitarian assistance to all Ethiopians in need, prevention of further human rights abuses and atrocities, and Eritrea's withdrawal from northern Ethiopia.
Spokesperson to the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, said the humanitarian situation in Tigray is one of the worst crises in the world and underlined that all hostilities should immediately stop. She also cautioned that those who commit atrocities will be held accountable.
After nearly 2 years of conflict, the crisis in northern Ethiopia is one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. With humanitarian access largely blocked since August, emergency nutrition and health supplies have completely run out in many areas, and severely malnourished populations, particularly children under 5, will start dying at alarming rates without immediate additional supplies. The United States urges the parties to resolve their differences through dialogue and prevent further human rights abuses. And as we have made clear directly to the relevant parties in recent days, those who commit atrocities will be held accountable.
Amnesty International says hundreds of civilians killed, including children killed from multiple airstrikes in Mekelle and Adidaro in August and September alone. In a report on Monday, Amnesty said Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have extrajudicially killed at least 40 people, including Eritrean refugees. Haile Gabra has more on this.
Amnesty International issued a report on Monday stating that hundreds of civilians were killed by multiple airstrikes in Mekelle and Adidara in August and September alone. The rights group expressed its fears over looming atrocities in Tigray as the war on Tigray intensifies. Amnesty International's director for Eastern and Southern Africa, Mulaya Mwananda, said Tigrayan civilians were living in fear that unspeakable atrocities such as murderers carrying out horrific atrocities against Tigrayan civilians. In March 2021, Ethiopia had admitted that, for the first time, the involvement of Eritrean forces when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed told the Ethiopian parliament that any damage Eritrean army did to our people was unacceptable. The atrocities committed against Tigrayan civilians by the Eritrean forces has long been documented by human rights organizations, including the state-backed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, which reported the grave human rights violations and attacks against civilians in historic and religious city of Aksum. Amnesty International had issued a joint report with Human Rights Watch back in April, stating that Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have carried out ethnic cleansing in western Tigray.
IDPs from the occupied town of Shararo in northwestern Tigray say indiscriminate shelling by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have forced them out of their homes. Our reporters spoke with IDPs sheltered in Abiy Adi that say they have been displaced multiple times as intense shelling by Eritrean forces in several areas across Tigray continues. Aragawi Gabra Mikael has more.
This is Tigray Gabra Mikael, an IDP displaced from Shararo and is currently sheltered in the town of Abiy Adi. She says she was forced to leave her hometown and seek shelter in a town after another, trying to escape heavy shelling and bombardment by the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces.
I was displaced from Shararo and I don't know where my family are now. On September 10th, I fled from Shararo to Adi Hagarai. Then after 3 days, I had to go to Shura. After staying there for several days, we fled to Aksum, trying to escape the heavy shelling there.
Gidey also said that atrocities committed on civilians by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces were one of the reasons she fled her hometown, fearing that atrocities could happen to her and her family members.
يحرد له دق أنستي جسسيو جلس لذولنا قل نقد بيك أنا نحدد.
The reason why I had to flee is because of the stories of rapes and killings I heard. People told me that some women I know were killed in my kuhli. So why would I stay there? That's the reason why I'm still on the run.
Gidey added that her life had been altered as she was forced to leave all her belongings behind to save her and her family's lives. She also said that she is currently found in a dire situation.
I
had a good life because I had a son that took care of me. I never went hungry. But now me and my husband are in hunger and thirst because we left all of our belongings.
Lataiwala is another IDP we found at a shelter in Abiy Adi. She was also forced to be displaced from Shararo along with her 5 children due to the indiscriminate shelling on residential areas.
We were displaced from Shararo and went to a place known as Zibanganna. Then we traveled to Zelazila on September 9 and we went 2 weeks on the wilderness there. We were forced to move from one place to another because there were constant heavy shelling everywhere we went. On top of that, my twin daughters became ill, so I went to Shura. But there were shelling there too. After that, we had to flee to Aksum, then to Abiy Adi.
Following the resumption of the war around the end of August, the number of IDPs continued to grow rapidly as the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces continue to shell cities and towns, targeting civilians and their properties.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.